we'll move on to the next segment, where Will is going to give everybody an update on the Simple DVT proposal that's currently live on the Lido forums.
Well, thanks, Izzy. So, hey everyone, my name is Will. I'm a contributor to Lido in the NOM work stream, and going to be talking about this Simple DVT module proposal. So, slide to work. Perfect. Starting at a high level, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but just to give context for those that don't know what distributed validator technology or DVT is. And the best way I like to think about this is basically utilizing almost a multi-sig to run a validator, right? So you have multiple node operators that work together to come to consensus and perform validator duties. And these node operators run distinct nodes that communicate with each other. And so there's a lot of benefits that come from this. When you think about resilience perspective, DVT generally operates in a threshold format. So the best example generally is like, think of 4 participants working together to run a single validator. In a 3 out of 4 threshold configuration, one of those distinct node operators can actually go offline, and the validator will continue to perform its duties, assuming that the other 3 are all operating properly. There's also really great benefits to decentralization across the infrastructure layer, geography, client types used. We'll talk more about that, as well as on the security side of things with something that's called distributed key generation, which basically is the process of, in this case, creating validator keys across the group of cluster participants without any one cluster participant having full access to the private key. And so when you think about this from a liquid staking protocol, there's numerous benefits, right? Because you, from a node operator perspective, don't have to be solely responsible for storing keys. The keys can be recreated and rebuilt basically if needed. But in general, you have a lower risk vector there because if one part of the shard gets like stolen, the full key isn't immediately compromised, at least. So moving on to really what we're going to be talking about, and this is the Simple DVT module. There's a QR code here you can scan. Would highly encourage you to check out the full post, which has a lot more detail versus this conversation, but hopefully going to cover most of the high points. But the Simple DVT module would be the second proposed module added to the Lido protocol. And very importantly, what this would do is leverage the existing design of the curated operator module. And so when I talk about the curated operator module, this is generally what people will think about when they think of the Lido node operator set, right? There's currently 37 node operators on mainnet running validators. And the idea here is to basically lift the existing code base that operates that module, copy it over onto the second module, and then use DVT through this format. And so the DVT that will be used will be by the 2 major providers, Obol Network and SSV Network. And this is not the first time that the Lido protocol in general has experienced DVT. There's been a total of 4 testnets, 2 with SSV, 2 with Obol, that have taken place on the Gurley testnet over the last year or so. And there's going to be an upcoming 3rd testnet. And so the idea here for this proposal is really that the experience that is gained from the second and has been gained from the second and upcoming 3rd testnet trials can be added to this existing module. The processes that Obol and SSV and Lido contributors have worked together with other node operators to sort of put together in terms of operating validators through this format can then be like translated to mainnet. Finally, on this slide, and probably the point here that I personally am most excited about, and I think most other Lido contributors, community members we've spoken about, is that this proposed module would also include solo and community stakers, in addition to other professional node operators and the curated operator set. And so in the prior DVT testnet round, there was actually 70 non-Lido node operators that participated. The majority of these were solo and community stakers. But this is pretty exciting because it's the first way that new node operators, especially solo community stakers, can participate in running validators for the protocol on mainnet if it is accepted. So here you can actually see a couple screenshots at the bottom of the deployment on Haleski, which just took place over the last couple of days. Pretty exciting, and this is on the operators UI, which you can see as well. A few points on this module. So initially, the module will be capped at 0.5% of total Lido stake. As of today, this could change by the time the module would actually be deployed, depending on inflows and outflows. That would represent about 1,350 validators. I think one of the main things I want to call out on this slide is that this module is not intended for indefinite use. And so I think this is a really great step in adding new node operators. It's a great step in stress testing and battle testing DVT on mainnet. But it's by no means the end all be all of where the protocol is heading, at least I would hope. And I think there's alignment on this in terms of how node operators should be able to use and participate with the protocol, right? The idea is that this is just a stepping stone on the way to more scalable modules that have permissionless elements. And DVT is a fairly new technology. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is a great way to really see that this can work on mainnet with a number of node operators and different kinds of node operators as well. In terms of the reward share, so it would look very similar to the curated module. Stakers would receive 90% of the rewards. There would be 10% reward share that is split between 8% going to the node operators that are participating in the DVT providers, and then 2% to the protocol. And so we'll talk about that going forward as well. So why should DVT be a thing? What is the reason that this should be adopted? I think starting from the top, so number one, the fastest way to add many new node operators to the protocol. I wholeheartedly believe that DVT in general represents this. I think that it makes a lot of sense that over time you could see many node operators participating in different formats of DVT. But the real key point here is that DVT allows for reduced trust requirements for participants. The threshold configuration allows certain node operators to not have to worry about necessarily having their power online 24 hours a day in some situations. You could go on vacation, and if you were participating as a solo staker, if you went on vacation and your power went out, your validator might not turn back online. But in this case, there's actually some redundancy here because as long as the other participants and the majority of, or the required number of the threshold is online, things should be okay. And so the proposal calls for the majority of clusters to be in a 507 threshold, which would mean that actually 2 nodes could go offline and the validator would still continue to perform duty successfully. So I mentioned actually before that during the second testnet round, 70 plus non-Lido node operators participated. The goal in the third upcoming round of DVT testnets is to really expand that number of participants overall. And the initial proposal for mainnet, if accepted, would call for 24 clusters in total with about 7 people each, which would easily get you to over 100 net new node operators potentially added to the protocol in Q1 of 2024, if accepted. That would be over 270% growth in the context of the current curated operator module with 37 node operators. So very significant. And if things go well, you could actually see even up to 200 net new node operators onboarded in the coming months following that initial deployment. Next would be really talking about the potential improvement that DVT can drive for the decentralization, distribution, and resilience of the underlying infrastructure that's used. So DVT allows, I really like to think about DVT starting at the micro, because usually we think about the network overall and the Lido node operator base, which node operators are using what kind of infrastructure that's presented in the Van reports. But here you can actually look at this at the validator level, right? You can have a validator with maybe 3 node operators running on bare metal servers, 2 running NOCCs at their home, maybe 1 in the public cloud. And in this scenario, if AWS goes offline, your validator doesn't actually stop performing duties likely. So there's great benefits to resilience and diversity here. You can have different combinations of the execution layer, consensus layer clients, which I think would make me pretty optimistic in general in reducing reliance on supermajority clients on the EL, or even like reducing usage and increasing usage of minority clients on both the EL and CL. And then the final point really is that this generally leads to more diverse geographic distribution because you can combine operators across different geos, which is beneficial both from an infrastructure resilience level, but also from a jurisdictional level as well. Third and finally on this slide, the Simple DVT module really presents a great opportunity to battle test SSV and OBL on mainnet. And so both of these teams have built great products. They've had like tremendous progress over the last couple of years. They've done a bunch of test stats, but the number of validators running on mainnet is still fairly small. And from the perspective of a liquid staking protocol, it really needs to still be proven out and battle tested. And so being able to take different combinations of node operators from different backgrounds, different regions, different infrastructure types, putting them together and being able to show that, yes, this will work on mainnet is a great way on the path to having modules that have more scalability and more permissionless elements. In general, like most of these things all drive further decentralization and resilience of both Lido and the underlying Ethereum validating ecosystem. So a few factors to consider and to talk about a little bit more in depth here. First would be on the economic side of things. So I mentioned before, there'd be a 10% reward share and 90% of rewards going to stakers. So this 10% reward share, there's 2% that would go to the treasury, and then an 8% module share, which we'll talk about. This is compared to the existing curating module, which has a 5% and 5% split. And so there's a few things to really think about here that are different when talking about operating as a DVT node operator versus maybe a solo staker. So rough numbers, running a solo validator today in like US dollar terms would be about $2,300 of rewards versus if you were participating in a DVT cluster, and even if you weren't using some kind of protocol to operate this, but just squad staking and doing this with friends, you'd be splitting that across all these members. And so the numbers come down quite significantly. There is desire to make this module and participating here attractive to help with the long-term alignment and wanting to participate in DVT modules, because it really helps the resilience of the underlying protocol, the underlying infrastructure. And so the module share would be split generally with 7% to the node operators and up to 1% or a little bit less, depending, which we'll talk about for the DVT providers to start. On the DVT provider side of things, there will be two sections, right? So OBO will have a certain number of clusters and SSV will have a certain number of clusters, or rather the node operators will be using those technologies to operate validators. So OBO for the clusters using OBO technology will receive 1% of the rewards for those clusters. SSV has a bit of a different configuration. And so to register and to operate a validator on the SSV network, you have to pay the SSV network fee in SSV tokens. So there's more detail about this on the forum post, but really the reasoning here to have reward share with DVT providers is to demonstrate alignment for continued module services, right? So these providers will be helping with troubleshooting of cluster participants, and then really helping with and supporting continued development of these DVT technologies, right? That both of the providers have very ambitious tech like targets to reach over the next couple of years. They want to add different clients and add different solutions. And I think that the DAO in the past has been very supportive of this. I think there's a lot of potential to continue supporting DVT. Is at least my personal belief is that over time it will represent a fairly material number of validators. And then finally as well, both solutions are in the early stages of mainnet deployments and quite honestly need to prove out their business models. They've had a lot of experience with many hundreds of node operators on testnet, and now it needs to prove out that these can be long-term sustainable businesses on mainnet. Next would be on the risk mitigation side of things to talk about. So we've talked a lot about the pros here of DVT, and I think the pros, from my perspective, definitely outweigh the cons. But it's important to talk about this because it is new technology. And so there's two options that are being considered in the proposal. First is utilizing the Lido cover fund, or the second option would be to use a third-party cover provider. So the Lido cover fund, there's more detail about this in the Lido research forums, currently contains about 6,200 ETH. Per research that's been done by the Lido analytical work stream, this is more than enough to compensate for most realistically conservative scenarios. Just from my personal perspective, when you consider that there are node operators that will have had prior experience in DVT, will have participated in DVT testnets, will be fairly randomized in terms of the way that they're combined in clusters, although there will be an element of mixing and matching infrastructure clients, geos, to help increase the infrastructure resilience benefits that we talked about earlier. This cover fund would likely contain a significant amount, and a catastrophic scenario is unlikely. But the one thing to consider is that just given that this is new technology, software bugs could always arise. The other option is that a third-party cover provider could propose a cover option to the DAO for either additional cover or full cover of this module. So there's actually two proposals that have already gone up on the forum thread, which was linked earlier. These are from Nexus Mutual and Chainproof. So I would highly encourage people interested to go weigh in, read the proposals, as this will be going up for vote in the next few days, which I'll talk about shortly. Final point to talk about on the risk mitigation side. So both OBO and SSV have now actually completed their first round of full audits around the protocol, which is extremely encouraging to see. But as I mentioned, they both have fairly ambitious plans in the future to continue improving things. So both providers have committed to continue conducting audits if there's any changes that go to mainnet, and then transparently presenting that to the DAO in that forum thread for community members to be able to review. Finally here, so here's the Simple DVT plan of action and timeline. I'm going to talk about a few of these things in more detail than the others, but we're currently at stage 1, right? So this is the DAO discussion, raising awareness about this potential module and the proposal about adopting Simple DVT and advancing this on mainnet. So the snapshot vote is planned to go live this Thursday. It will run for 7 days. So very much would encourage people to read the proposal, ask questions in the forum thread, ask any questions in general, have opinions, and especially around the cover options, because that will be part of the vote that goes live on Thursday. Number 2 is sort of in progress. As I showed earlier, the second module on Koleski has now actually been deployed, and we're very close to starting with the third round of DVT testnet trials. The potential timelines for this are starting as early as next week, and hopefully as late as the last one. There's one piece that we're trying to just get finalized, which is the operation of NOCC safes. There's a grant that's been now given to the Protofire team who will be deploying this and working on getting the UI deployed. So hopefully we'll get the OBOL testnet started in the next 2 weeks at the latest, and then the SSV trial is planned to start towards the end of November. Following this, there will be an on-chain vote. And so the first 2 are happening. Number 3 and onward will really depend on the outcome of the snapshot vote that will take place over the next week or so. If that does successfully pass, the next step would be to have an on-chain vote via Aragon, which would actually add the second mainnet module and also create something which would be called the Simple DVT Module Committee. So the Simple DVT Module Committee would be made up of OBOL, Lido, SSV, and members of the NOCC contributors. And this would be a module committee that is responsible for adding node operators to the protocol and also responsible for raising the limit for validators that are participating in clusters or node operators participating in clusters. And so this is a slightly different than the way it works on the curated set currently. This would be outside of the code base of the mainnet module that is being copied over. So there's no change to the direct code there. But this would allow for much more efficiency without having to have Aragon votes every time that there is a new node operator cluster that needs to be added. But given that this will be done with easy track, LDO holders will still be able to veto anything that comes up. Assuming that this all goes well and the testnet trial performs correctly, there will be a performance criteria review. The performance criteria is outlined in the forum thread, so it would point you there if you want to see the specifics, and then an evaluation by the NOCC. So the NOCC is the Lido Node Operator Subgovernance Group. This is a subcommittee of the DAO that is made up of mostly Lido on Ethereum and other Lido on X node operators, in addition to a couple of DAO contributors and third-party community members as well, all generally well-versed in the staking and node operator ecosystem. And they will be responsible for doing an initial pass over the testnet data that will also be presented to the DAO. So this will consider things like how the SSV clusters perform, how the OBOL clusters performed, how specific clusters performed versus each other, and then also looking at the participants themselves to see if there was any issues with setup, to see if they went offline for significant amounts of time. And the NOCC will then come with a proposal to the DAO to share the proposed clusters that will be added in the initial stage. That moves us on to step 5. So once this proposal has sort of been made to the DAO, if there's no issue, then the Simple DVT Module Committee would create node operator entries and raise the key limits for these clusters. The proposal calls for 24 clusters to start, so 12 node operators or 12 entries for SSV, 12 entries for OBOL, and these would likely all consist with a 5 of 7 threshold configuration, meaning you'd add over 100 new node operators to the protocol. If performance for these clusters, which would all have 5 validators likely to start, was like at least performant in line with general mainnet performance of other validators, then there would be the potential to add additional clusters and validators, given that the module cap would be starting at 0.5% if approved. A final point here to sort of talk about through in detail is that 3 months after the deployment, the NOCC could consider something that would be classified really just for classification purposes with the title of advanced node operators. So advanced node operators would be node operators that participated in the testnet trial, participated on mainnet, had strong performance, potentially were helpful with other community members through the trials in terms of troubleshooting or any other issues. And if this designation was then moved forward with, clusters that have more than 50% or 50% plus of the constituents being advanced node operators could potentially raise the validator limits to more significant numbers. So this would be helpful from 2 points. One, it would make the number of validators operating in this format more material, and two, really help with the profitability factor for node operators participating here. I think an important thing to call out is that this wouldn't necessarily only be professional node operators. It would be very encouraging to see many solo community stakers also have this designation, which again is just really to represent this internally, that certain clusters would be eligible to have higher numbers of validators. Finally, here on number 8, so again, want to highlight this. This module is not intended for indefinite use. It's a stepping stone and would be wound down after about 3 years, with the goal of really having more scalable and modules with much more of a permissionless entry format in the future. So there's a timeline here at the bottom, which you can look at, starting from really the backward first testnet, which took place in 2022 with both OBOL and SSV. In 2023, we had the second round of testnets with both, which took place in the spring. Over the last few months, there's been an open interest forum for people that would like to participate, and the trials are now starting likely over the next few weeks. If you missed the application form, feel free to reach out at nom@lido.fi. Happy to figure out if there's a way to squeeze you in either this round, or also there will be an upcoming round likely starting in January or February to have a 4th DVT testnet, which will hopefully also have some more people join to participate in a potential mainnet launch if approved by the DAO. But the goal here would be to launch this module likely the end of January or beginning of February. So just wrapping up here, from my personal perspective, I think this is a really exciting way for the DAO to help new node operators participate in the protocol. I think it's encouraging to really start battle testing DVT on mainnet ahead of more scalable and permissionless modules that will hopefully be added in the coming months. And happy to take any questions. Feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Awesome, Will. Thank you very much. I don't see any questions on YouTube so far, but there is a question in Zoom from Sheedy. He says, I happen to have not operated a validator node before, but would love to operate one and help decentralized network, introduce and educate more people to this. How are newbies trained, guided, and helped?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first resources I'd point you to are definitely on the SSV network and OBOL network websites. They have got really great documentation and they explain the process step by step. There's another initiative that is actually being launched in accordance or sort of lined up with the Community Staking Lifeguards initiative. There's more detail about that on the Lido research forums. But there's the intention to start hosting a workshop around DVT and to help give educational support to people that are interested in running validators via either Simple DVT or participating in the next testnet. And so would highly encourage you to join there. We can chat after the call just to make sure that we've got all your information. But the goal here is to help node operators gain experience with DVT and really get more solo community stakers and others that aren't necessarily experienced yet with DVT involved here.
Awesome. I don't see any more questions, and maybe just as we wrap up, if you can scroll back to the slide that has the QR code for the link to the proposal, just in case that anybody missed it, to go check it out. Of course, either on their desktop or on their phones. So a reminder here that this proposal is still in discussion. Hopefully, in the next couple days, the discussion will move to the proposal stage. But really, Simple DVT is kind of a proposed first step into broadening the scope of modules that node operators can use to utilize the Lido protocol, and B, to make a foray into advancing DVT both as an infrastructure layer for staking on Ethereum, but also as a way to meaningfully broaden the node operator base, both on Ethereum and especially on the Lido protocol. So if you guys have any questions, and again, if you also missed the participation form, shoot an email to nom@lido.fi or write something on the forums or ask in the Discord, and we'll try to figure out if we can get you into this testnet or the next testnet, which may be more likely if you're somebody that's only learning about DVT now. And stay tuned for more information, as Will said, about resources for new community stakers, how you can learn how to run validators, and how you can participate in future opportunities to do so using the Lido protocol.